Welcome to The Explainer. I'm absolutely thrilled you're here, because today we're diving right into a highly deceptive logical trick. We're getting into that debate hacker mindset to decode a tactic that is literally designed to confuse you, tire you out, and twist your conversations into absolute knots. We're talking about begging the question, and more specifically, the circular logic loop. So have you ever felt trapped in an intellectual hamster wheel during an argument? You know exactly the feeling I'm talking about. You've been going back and forth with someone for, 20 minutes, and you're starting to feel totally dizzy. Every single time you ask them for actual proof, they just repeat their main point using slightly different words. It's exhausting. You're burning massive amounts of energy, yet you are going absolutely nowhere. Well, that frustrating little trap is what we call the circular logic loop. It's a highly deceptive debate trick used by lazy thinkers to essentially lock your brain in a cage. People deploy this when they desperately want to prove a point, but here's the kicker. They have absolutely zero outside evidence to back it up. So instead of finding facts, they just loop their logic. Today, we're decoding the mechanics behind this tactic and, more importantly, showing you exactly how to dismantle it. Here's our roadmap for decoding this logical fallacy today. First, we'll cover the circular logic loop, then the anatomy of the trick, followed by assertion versus verification. After that, we'll hit the independent support framework, and finally, shattering the endless loop. All right, let's jump straight into section 1, the circular logic loop, and look at the structural problem. To really understand the root of the problem here, we have to look at the actual anatomy of a circular argument in the formal study of logic. You see, in logic textbooks, this specific fallacy is known as begging the question. Now, you're making a circular argument when you assume the very thing that's being disputed, or you assume the exact thing that needs to be proved. Basically, you're using the conclusion as your evidence. Think of it like a simple math equation where premise A equals conclusion B. But in this trap, A equals B and B equals A. It acts exactly like a snake eating its own tail. The person is literally using their claim to prove their claim. There's absolutely no external validation happening at all. Let me walk you through a classic textbook example of this bad form of reasoning. So suppose you're in an argument and your opponent tells you that you should believe the Bible because it's the Word of God. Naturally, as the critical thinker you are, you ask them, well, how do we know that the Bible is the Word of God? And they look at you with a completely straight face and reply, well, we know it because it says so in the Bible. Do you see what happened there? What they've just done is appeal to the reliability of a text in order to assert that the exact same text is reliable. They are, quite literally, begging the question. Moving right along to section 2, anatomy of the trick, where we need a quick linguistic reality check. Now, what's kind of wild is the stark contrast in how we use this phrase in modern society. Think about how many times you've heard a news anchor say something like, well, that begs the question, when what they actually mean is, that raises the question. Philosophers absolutely love using begging the question to describe circular logic, but in everyday language, yeah, we've basically lost that linguistic fight. But make no mistake, in a formal debate, if someone is begging the question, they are arguing in a circle. They aren't asking a new question at all.
Okay, let's hit section 3, assertion versus verification, and look at the core difference.
To understand why this is so manipulative and, honestly, so lethally effective at confusing an audience, we have to grasp one absolutely vital difference. An assertion is simply a statement that claims something is true. It relies entirely on a declaration. And remember, literally anyone in the world can make an assertion. Verification, on the other hand, is the process of confirming whether that claim is actually correct. Verification relies on evidence, checking, and, most importantly, independent support. Manipulative debaters use circular logic to disguise a raw assertion as a verified fact, completely bypassing the need for actual evidence. For instance, if I tell you, I'm the smartest person in the room because I'm the most intelligent, well, I haven't given you a single shred of evidence. I just used a fancy synonym to repeat myself. But here's the trick. To an untrained ear, the rhythm and the sheer confidence of that sentence sounds exactly like a completed argument. They take their raw opinion, dress it up in a different set of words, and try to pass it off as independent proof. And boom, it traps the listener in a closed loop. It's a pretty wild logical rule, but a true argument must always have a solid foundation. An argument cannot be a roof resting on top of another roof. I mean, that structure is just going to collapse. Circular logic is really just an intellectual magic trick, where the debater is trying to levitate without any strings. Please, whatever you do, don't let them convince you they're flying when they're really just jumping up and down on the floor. This brings us to Section 4, independent support, and the framework you need. When you finally spot this trap, you simply cannot afford to get dragged into arguing over the definitions of their words. You have to break the circle entirely. So here's the 3-step independent support framework required to do exactly that. Step 1, separate the premise. Step 2, expose the circle. And Step 3, demand independent verification. Let's break down exactly how to use these in real time. All right, so Step 1 involves separating the supporting evidence from the conclusion right in your own mind. You've got to actively remember that a genuine argument has 2 very distinct components: a set of premises which act as supporting evidence, and a conclusion based entirely on that evidence. When someone argues in a circle, their premise and their conclusion are the exact same thing. You must mentally separate them to break that A equals B loop.
Once you see that loop clearly, move right to Step 2. You have to expose the circle. You need to stop the debate right there and calmly point out the structural flaw. I highly recommend using this exact phrasing. You're making a circular argument. You're using your conclusion as your evidence, which means you're assuming the exact thing you're supposed to be proving. Saying it like this clearly flags the error without getting overly emotional or defensive.
And finally, we reach Step 3, demanding independent verification. Your goal here is to force them outside of their own loop, cut off those little escape routes, and require objective data. You are putting a hard stop to the recycling of opinions. Tell them, look, anyone can make an assertion, but an assertion requires independent support to be verified. Do you have outside objective data to prove this claim, or are you just going to keep repeating it? This forces them to produce actual facts or back down.
Let's wrap it up with Section 5, shattering the loop, and the psychological code to do it.
So the next time someone tries to prove their point by simply repeating it louder, you know the type, I want you to lower your voice to a serious register, look them dead in the eye, smile just a little bit, and deliver this exact script. Repeating your claim with different adjectives doesn't magically turn it into a fact. Do you have a second source, or is this just a solo act? Delivering this immediately neutralizes the trap and totally reclaims the conversation for you.
Ultimately, a genuine debate is about finding the truth through independent verification. It is absolutely not about running laps around your own unsupported assertions. Why does this matter for you? Well, because as long as manipulative debaters use circular logic to beg the question and trap you, the truth gets entirely buried. You have to demand real, independent evidence to keep the conversation honest and, most importantly, moving forward.
So, I'll leave you with this final provocative thought. Are you ready to demand real evidence and stop getting spun in circles? The next time you start to feel dizzy in a debate, just remember the independent support framework. Use these debate hacks to demand actual truth in your own conversations. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Stay sharp out there and never let them spin you in circles.